Tonight, I don't want to sound perfect. I don't want to sound like a hero or a poet who has rehearsed every word. I just want to sound honest, because love deserves honesty more than perfection. You see, life has this strange way of making us strong on the outside and quiet on the inside. We learn to smile in crowds, to laugh at jokes, to chase dreams, to survive every storm that comes our way. But deep down, there is always a small, silent place in the heart that waits for someone who feels like home. I used to believe that strength meant walking alone, that independence meant never needing anyone. But the truth is, the bravest thing a heart can do is admit that it wants to belong somewhere, that it wants to choose someone and be chosen back. Because love isn't about fairy tales. It's not about perfect timing or perfect people. Love is about finding someone who makes the ordinary feel magical, someone whose presence turns silence into comfort and distance into longing. And somewhere between all the chaos of this world, between the noise, the fears, the endless nights and uncertain mornings, my heart started whispering one simple question, a question that carries hope, vulnerability, courage, and everything I've never been brave enough to say before. Will you be mine? There was a time when I believed silence was safer than truth, when I thought feelings were things you carefully folded away and placed somewhere no one could reach. I learned how to laugh without saying too much, how to stand in a room full of people and still keep my heart hidden. Life teaches you that skill. It teaches you to protect yourself, to build invisible walls, to become strong in ways nobody notices. But strength has a strange cost. The stronger you become, the quieter your heart gets. It stops asking for things. It stops expecting miracles. It tells you that being okay is enough, that survival is enough, that walking alone is enough. And for a long time, I believed it. I believed that love was something distant, something that belonged to stories and songs and late night dreams. Something beautiful, yes, but not something meant for ordinary people living ordinary days. I believed love was for people who were braver, luckier, more certain than me. Until one day, something changed in the quietest way possible. Nothing dramatic, no thunder, no fireworks, just a moment so simple that most people would miss it. A conversation that lasted longer than it should have, a laugh that stayed in my mind longer than the joke, a silence that didn't feel empty, a presence that didn't feel heavy. And suddenly, the world I had carefully organized began to feel different. Not bigger, not louder, just warmer. It's strange how love doesn't arrive like a storm. It arrives like sunlight, slowly, gently, until one day you realize the room is bright and you don't remember when the darkness left. I started noticing small things, the way time moved differently when you were near, how minutes became seconds and hours felt like moments, how the noise of the world softened when your voice entered the air, how even the most ordinary days carried a quiet kind of magic. And that scared me, because when you spend so much of your life convincing yourself that you don't need anyone, the moment you start needing someone feels like stepping onto thin ice. Every feeling becomes a risk, every smile becomes a question, every heartbeat becomes louder than logic. I tried to ignore it at first. I told myself it was temporary, just a phase, just a passing emotion. I told myself that life would go back to normal if I waited long enough. But love is patient in a way fear never is. Fear screams, love whispers, and whispers have a way of staying longer than noise. The more I tried to push it away, the more it quietly stayed, not demanding attention, not asking for anything, just existing, like a steady light that refused to flicker. I began to understand something I had never understood before. Love doesn't weaken you, it reveals you. It reveals the parts of you that hope, the parts of you that dream, the parts of you that want to build something instead of just survive. It shows you the version of yourself you were too afraid to become. And that realization is terrifying, because once you see that version of yourself, you can't pretend you don't know them. You can't go back to the comfort of emotional distance. You can't return to the safe emptiness you once called peace. You start imagining futures you never allowed yourself to imagine. Simple futures, quiet futures, futures filled with shared mornings and soft conversations and laughter that doesn't need a reason. Futures where happiness isn't loud or dramatic but steady and real. And suddenly the question changes. It's no longer what if this doesn't work? It becomes what if this is the one thing that could? Love changes the way you see time. It makes the future feel closer and the past feel softer. It gives meaning to ordinary days. It turns waiting into hope and distance into longing. You start to realize that the bravest people in the world are not the ones who never feel fear. They are the ones who feel it deeply and still choose to speak. Because speaking your heart is the greatest risk a person can take. There is no armor for vulnerability. No I yield for honesty when you open your heart. You offer it exactly as it is, unpolished, imperfect, real. And real things can be rejected. That thought kept me awake more nights than I can count. The idea that this feeling, this fragile and beautiful thing, could be misunderstood or unseen. The idea that the words living inside my chest might never find a home in the world. But then I realized something even more frightening than rejection: regret. The kind of regret that sits quietly in your life and whispers, "What if you had been brave once?" The kind of regret that turns memories into questions and questions into echoes. I didn't want to live with echoes. I didn't want to look back years from now and wonder what would have happened if I had spoken when my heart was loud and hopeful and alive. I didn't want to become someone who almost loved, who almost spoke, who almost tried. Because almost is the saddest word in any language. So I started listening to my heart instead of arguing with it. I stopped asking it to be logical and started asking it to be honest. And honesty has a way of simplifying everything. It told me something simple. It told me that life feels brighter when you're near. It told me that silence feels softer when you're beside me. It told me that happiness feels closer when I imagine you in my tomorrow. It told me that this feeling isn't temporary. It isn't passing. It isn't imaginary. It is real and steady and growing in a way that feels both gentle and unstoppable. Love doesn't always arrive with certainty. Sometimes it arrives with hope. And hope is fragile, but it is also powerful. It is the quiet belief that something beautiful can happen, even when the world offers no guarantees. And standing here in this moment, I realize that love is not about guarantees. It's about choice. Choosing to care, choosing to stay, choosing to risk everything for the chance of something real. Every love story begins with a moment of courage, a moment where someone decides that fear will not speak louder than hope. A moment where silence finally becomes words. This is that moment for me. Not because everything is perfect, not because life suddenly makes sense, but because my heart refuses to stay quiet any longer. Because loving you has never felt like chaos. It has felt like clarity, like finding the right song after years of noise, like finding warmth after years of cold, like finding a place that feels familiar even though you've never been there before. You make the ordinary feel meaningful. You make time feel generous. You make the future feel less like a question and more like a possibility. And that changes everything. For the first time, I don't want to run from the future. I want to walk toward it, slowly, honestly, with hope instead of hesitation. I don't want perfect days. I don't want a perfect story. I just want real moments, shared laughter, quiet mornings, long conversations that don't need a destination. I want the simple things that suddenly feel extraordinary when I imagine them with you. Because love, at its core, is not grand gestures or dramatic promises. It is presence. It is choosing someone again and again, even on ordinary days. It is waking up and knowing that the world feels better because someone exists in it. And somewhere between all the doubts and all the dreams, one truth keeps returning to me, steady and impossible to ignore, growing louder with every heartbeat, every memory, every quiet moment where your name appears in my thoughts without warning, without permission, without effort, as if my heart has already made a decision long before my mind was ready to understand it. As if every path I have walked and every lesson I have learned and every moment I have lived has been quietly leading me to this exact realization that there is something deeply human and beautifully terrifying about choosing one person in a world full of endless possibilities. And saying that out of all the stories that could be written, out of all the futures that could exist, the one that feels the most real, the most hopeful, the most alive is the one where our lives continue forward not as parallel lines drifting through time, but as paths that slowly and intentionally move closer until distance becomes memory and uncertainty becomes courage and hope becomes something strong enough to speak out loud, even when the voice carrying it trembles slightly. Under the weight of everything it is about to risk, and everything it is about to reveal, and everything it has been quietly protecting for far too long, there is something deeply human about wanting one person in a world filled with billions. It doesn't make logical sense. It isn't practical. It isn't efficient. If life were a calculation, love would never pass the test. Yet every heart, no matter how guarded or independent, eventually discovers the quiet desire to belong somewhere, to someone. For a long time, I told myself belonging was unnecessary. I convinced myself that independence was the ultimate freedom, that needing no one meant being safe from disappointment, safe from heartbreak, safe from the unpredictable storms that love can bring. I built routines, goals, dreams, and distractions. I filled my days with progress and my nights with tiredness, so sleep would arrive before my thoughts could ask difficult questions. But even the busiest life has quiet moments. Moments when the noise fades and the truth steps forward without permission. Moments when you realize success doesn't keep you warm at night. Achievement doesn't laugh at your jokes. Progress doesn't sit beside you in silence and make it feel full instead of empty. There is a difference between a full life and a full heart. I learned that slowly. I began noticing the small spaces between moments, the pause after a good day, the silence after a long conversation ends, the strange emptiness that appears when you have something beautiful to share and no one specific to share it with. Those spaces are quiet, but they are powerful. They whisper truths that busyness tries to hide. In those quiet spaces, a question started forming. Not loud, not urgent, just steady and persistent. A question about connection, about partnership, about choosing one person and allowing them to choose you back. At first, the idea felt distant, like a horizon you admire but never expect to reach. But life has a way of bringing distant things closer when you least expect it. A chance meeting, a simple conversation, a moment that feels ordinary until it becomes unforgettable without asking for permission. You didn't arrive in my life like a dramatic event. There was no sudden shift in the universe, no cinematic music playing in the background. You arrived in the most honest way possible, quietly, naturally, without trying to be extraordinary. And somehow, that made everything extraordinary. It wasn't one big moment that changed everything. It was many small ones, the kind people often overlook, the kind that don't make headlines but quietly reshape a life. A conversation that felt effortless, a laugh that felt genuine, a silence that felt comfortable instead of awkward, a moment of understanding that didn't require explanation. These things seem small, but they carry enormous meaning. Because real connection is not built in grand gestures. It is built in small, consistent moments that feel real and safe and steady. I began to notice how different the world felt when you were part of it. The same streets looked warmer. The same days felt lighter. The same future looked less uncertain. Nothing outside had changed, yet everything inside had shifted in a way I couldn't ignore. That realization was both beautiful and terrifying. Beautiful because it felt like discovering a new color in a world I thought I already understood. Terrifying because it meant I could lose it. Because once you recognize how much someone matters, you also recognize how much you have to risk by saying it out loud. Vulnerability is a strange thing. It asks you to stand without armor and trust that your honesty will be met with care. It asks you to offer your heart without guarantees. It asks you to accept uncertainty and still choose courage. For a long time, I tried to convince myself that silence was safer, that feelings could remain unspoken and life would continue. Days passed, weeks passed, time moved forward exactly as it always does. But something inside me stayed still. Unspoken feelings don't disappear. They don't fade quietly into the background. They wait. They grow heavier. They turn into thoughts that visit you late at night and questions that follow you into the morning. What if this is real? What if this is rare? There is a moment in every person's life when they realize that avoiding risk is also a risk, that protecting your heart too carefully can keep it from living fully. That silence can create a different kind of heartbreak, the heartbreak of never knowing what might have been. I didn't want that kind of heartbreak. I didn't want to become someone who looks back and wonders about the words they never said. I didn't want to turn possibility into memory before it even had a chance to become reality. Because love is not something you wait for forever. It is something you recognize and respond to. It is something you choose. And choosing someone is the most courageous promise a heart can make. It means deciding that out of all the people in the world, one person feels like home. It means deciding that your future becomes brighter when their presence is part of it. It means accepting that life will still be imperfect and unpredictable, but choosing to face that unpredictability together instead of alone. Choosing one person is not about losing independence. It is about sharing it. It is about building a life where dreams are not replaced but expanded, where laughter is multiplied, where challenges feel lighter because they are no longer carried by one heart alone. I began imagining what life could look like if courage replaced hesitation. Not a perfect life, not a flawless story, just a real one. A life filled with ordinary mornings that feel meaningful because they are shared. A life filled with simple conversations that stretch late into the night because time feels generous when you don't want the moment to end. A life where silence is comfortable and laughter is frequent and presence is enough. I started realizing that love is not about extraordinary days. It is about making ordinary days feel extraordinary. It is about knowing that no matter how chaotic the world becomes, there is one person who stands beside you, one person who sees you clearly and chooses to stay anyway. One person who turns uncertainty into hope simply by being there. That kind of connection is rare, and rare things deserve courage. So I began listening to the quiet voice inside me instead of the loud voice of fear. And the quiet voice kept repeating the same truth. Some opportunities appear only once. Some moments ask for bravery only once. Some feelings deserve words before time carries them away. I realized that the future is shaped by moments like this. Moments where honesty wins over hesitation. Moments where hope speaks louder than doubt. Because love is not guaranteed, but neither is tomorrow. And if life has taught me anything, it is that the most meaningful things are often the most uncertain. That uncertainty no longer feels frightening. It feels alive. It feels real. It feels like standing at the edge of something meaningful and choosing to step forward instead of stepping back. I don't know what the future holds. No one does. But I know what I feel now. I know what my heart has been trying to say in quiet moments and late nights and unguarded thoughts. I know that the idea of a future without you feels smaller than the idea of a future with you. I know that the world feels warmer when I imagine walking through it together. I know that the unknown feels less intimidating when I picture facing it side by side instead of alone. And that realization changes everything. Because love is not about certainty, it is about intention. It is about standing in the present and choosing the possibility of a shared tomorrow. Every story begins with a moment of honesty, a moment where the truth finally becomes louder than fear, a moment where silence becomes words and hope becomes action. This is that moment. Not because everything is perfect, not because life suddenly makes sense, but because my heart refuses to remain quiet any longer. Because the possibility of a shared future feels stronger than the comfort of silent distance. Because choosing you feels like choosing courage, choosing hope, choosing something real and meaningful and beautifully uncertain in a world that often feels temporary and unpredictable. And somewhere between every heartbeat and every quiet thought and every moment where your presence lingers in my mind, long after the conversation has ended, I have come to understand that love is not a sudden decision, but a slow realization that grows stronger with time until it becomes impossible to ignore, impossible to silence, impossible to keep hidden any longer as it gently but persistently transforms fear into bravery and hesitation, into clarity and possibility, into something that feels close enough to reach, if only I am brave enough to extend my hand toward the foo. Sure and trust that the answer waiting on the other side might be the beginning of something beautiful and real, and lasting, and worth every risk that comes with choosing one person and asking them to walk beside you through all the ordinary and extraordinary days that life will place. In your path together without knowing exactly where the road will lead, but believing deeply that walking it side by side will always feel more meaningful than walking it alone.